How do you respond differently to your chronic symptoms when that feels impossible to do? It is a special kind of torture to know what you need to do and yet be completely unable to do it because of how afraid you feel. And I know that feeling. I had tried to heal my nervous system for years before I finally had that experience that tipped my system over the edge. So by the time I was dealing with all these physical symptoms and all this chronic pain, I felt like I had already failed at the thing you needed to do to recover. And there were aspects about my experience that felt different than everybody else's. And I think that's common. It's like that uniqueness factor where we're like, oh, well, mine's different because there was an external event. I had a dental surgery. I had an injection that set off the nerve. I had a history of lots of trauma and CPTSD. And like, we have this very unique map of what we've been through and why it's different. And yet I knew that I needed to heal from my chronic anxiety if I wanted to address the chronic pain, but that just felt impossible. And that was because being with my symptoms felt impossible. I didn't want to be in my body at all. I had become almost like addicted to being distracted. For me, it was mostly with my phone. It was anything I could do to just avoid how I was feeling. And I didn't want to give up anything that provided even a small amount of relief. And it felt like if I were going to do this work fully 100%, I was going to have to give up every safeguard that provided any relief. And that felt terrifying because my capacity was already so low. So here's what I'm going to show you today: why it feels impossible, why that feeling is lying to you, and how to do it anyway. And make sure you save this video because I feel like this is one of the number one things that is preventing people from getting better. I just finished a over 2-hour long Q&A with the students that have purchased my course. And what I like to do is I like to look at all of the questions together and ask myself, what are the recurring themes here? What's coming up again and again? Or what is the underlying thread through all of these questions? Because there always is. And every single question underneath the surface had one thing in common: this energy of it feels impossible. I get it. I understand, but it feels impossible to do. And I want to talk about why that is. Just a reminder that when you sign up for my course, you get access to a bonus broadcast feed, which is exclusive content that you get monthly, but there's no subscription fee. So I will link my course in the description. I want to talk about that feeling of impossible, that feeling of I can't do this because it feels impossible to do. And what I want to say about that is feeling impossible doesn't mean it is impossible. Feeling impossible doesn't mean it's impossible to do. When you are sensitized, two things are happening. Fear is very high and symptoms are very high. And your brain does something with that information. It reads it as a sign that you can't do it. But you have to learn that fear and feeling that fear is not a sign to stop. It is not a stop sign. Same thing with symptoms. Symptoms and the intensity of symptoms and a flare-up of symptoms is not a sign to stop. It's not a sign to stop what you're doing. It's not a sign that something has gone wrong, despite how much it feels that way. Chronic fear and chronic symptoms are like the main symptom of sensitization. Nothing is going wrong when you try something and symptoms go up and it feels really scary. And we have to stop using fear to mean that we can't do something. We have to stop letting fear stop us. There is a reason why we choose to stay stuck. And yes, I am phrasing it that way because initially, in the beginning, we're not choosing to stay stuck. We're stuck. It's inadvertent. It's innocent. We don't know that we're doing that. And then we get the education and we understand, okay, so chronic symptoms are due to a loop in the brain. They are due to a system that has become so sensitive over time because of living in this extended period of a threat state. It has been living at such a high level of activation that your baseline is super high and we have no room to move. We have lost all of our capacity. That is nervous system sensitization. If you aren't quite sure if your nervous system is sensitized, I have a quiz that you can take. It's free. It takes 60 seconds. You can give it some of your information about what you're specifically dealing with, and it will let you know if you're sensitized. So I'll link that in the description as well. But I did this. I did this for a really long time. I knew what to do. I knew what the problem was. I knew that I was going to have to be in relationship with my symptoms in a different way, and I just didn't do it. I knew that I needed to stop absorbing information and begin taking action, and I just didn't do it. I was essentially choosing to stay in it anyway. And why would anybody do that? Once they have the information, once they know what's going on and what needs to happen, why would you choose to stay in this loop? I think for me, it was because I was too afraid of what changing was going to feel like, and that the familiar suffering begins to feel like something that is more desirable than choosing to walk right into something that terrifies you. So we do a lot of trade-offs. We do these trade-offs of, if this helps for a little bit, I'll take that, versus this is going to be a little bit more challenging, but it's going to help the overall thing get completely better. That is something that our brain doesn't choose often when the higher part of our brain is offline and we're mostly living from that threat state. And that's when you really feel like you're stuck in this loop. You know what to do. I know what to do. And when it's time to do it, I can't. When it's time to do it, it feels impossible. But that feeling of it feeling impossible is not evidence that you can't do it. And again, it's not a sign to stop. Too many people are waiting for these things to reduce. They are waiting for the fear to reduce before they do the scary thing. They are waiting for the symptoms to reduce and just not be as extreme, and then they'll take action. But as you know, the more you wait around without taking action, like the worse it gets, because when we're not taking action, when we aren't showing up differently, we're showing up in the same way and reinforcing these loops and inadvertently reinforcing these symptoms in the brain and in the nervous system. And avoiding the work is its own kind of suffering. But it's a suffering that doesn't hold the ability to recover. Both of them are suffering. It is suffering to avoid the work and for time to pass and for months and years to pass without us getting better. And yeah, it's also really extremely challenging to do this work and to respond differently, which I'll get into in a second, respond differently in those moments. It is challenging, but they're both challenging in their own way. And one of them will help you get better. And one of them keeps you the same. It keeps you locked into this old loop. And that is the way that we delay our healing. We delay it because we're so afraid of what it looks like to do something different than what we're doing. And I think a lot of this has to do with this lack of control. There will have to be a moment in this journey where you surrender. You surrender this thing that you've been trying to grip to so tightly, this perception of control and being able to get to the bottom of it and finding the magical treasure in all of this, which is like, I found the thing that made all of this stop. I did this one practice, or I took this one supplement, or I found this one practitioner and they did whatever they do and it was gone forever. But that's not how sensitization works. Unfortunately, I wish it was. If it was, I would have found a solution, 10 years ago. So how do you actually do it when it feels impossible to show up differently with your symptoms, to respond in a way that is more rooted in safety than in fear and fixing and focus? This is the part that people aren't going to love. This is the part I didn't love. I like to remind as much as possible that I respect everyone's journey. I think that this process of getting better is going to take as long as it's going to take for every single one of us. That's why there's no timeline. That's why you'll hear of people getting better so much faster, and you'll hear of people who it took years to get better. And I think that it all happens perfectly for us. I really do. I am so grateful that I put in the work, because I now am living a life that's better than I could have ever imagined, with a peace that only this type of experience could have given me. I almost feel bad for people who don't have to go through this experience. Stay with me, because I'm so chill now. I'm so chill. I don't let these little things bother me. I don't let things get to me. I deal with irritability and the normal range of human emotions. Like, I am human, but I have this baseline level of peace. I think so many people are chasing calm. I have a baseline level of peace, and it is such a gift, because the other day, my husband mentioned, I think back over the last couple of years and how hard it was and everything I went through and going into the hospital and just the darkest time of our life, to be honest. And he's like, and I asked myself, would I take it back? Would I have prevented that all from happening to you and from us going through that? And he said, and I wouldn't. And I completely agree. So I want to just take this moment to really try to convince you that doing this work is so important. It's so necessary, and it's so freeing. It will open you up to being able to live your life in a way you never knew was possible. Because for most of us, we've dealt with being anxious and afraid our whole life for a myriad of different reasons. So let's get back to the part of it that you're not going to love. There is no special hack here. I'm going to tell you exactly what I did. How did I get on the other side of all of this, despite being in a place where I truly felt it was so impossible that I checked myself into a psychiatric hospital? Because I truly believed I could not do it. I did not have what it took. It felt impossible for me to do what I had to do. I stopped letting the fact that it felt impossible keep me from doing the work. In fact, I began to expect it to feel impossible when I would have these moments that were so challenging that I truly didn't think I could make it through. I remembered, yeah, this is how it feels. It feels like I don't have an option here. It feels like there's nothing else I can do than whatever I'm doing to jump in and try to fix what's happening. I expected that. I expected my brain, my sensitized brain, my brain and my nervous system that are not reading reality correctly, because they are not. They think everything's a threat. They think I'm in an emergency state. But if I go to the ER, they're going to tell me no emergency going on here. So I know it's not reading reality correctly. So feeling impossible is part of sensitization. And I knew, because of what I had learned, that fear was a symptom of sensitization. Fear was not a stop sign. It wasn't a sign to stop. It wasn't a sign to run from what I was feeling. It was actually a sign to lean in. It was actually a sign to soften and to allow. It was not a sign that maybe I got everything wrong and maybe I need to try something else and maybe it's something real right now. No. I also knew that symptom spiking was not a sign that something has gone wrong. I know people have told you that before. And if they haven't, I'm telling it to you right now. Fear being high is not a problem. Symptoms being high, symptoms being 24/7, symptoms flaring, old symptoms coming back, new symptoms coming up. None of that is abnormal with sensitization. That is the most normal part of it. But the most important things you need to remember is you need to stop waiting to feel ready, and you need to stop waiting to feel brave. Ready is never going to come. You're never going to feel ready. And bravery comes when you're already in motion. Confidence comes when you're already in motion. Belief comes when you're already in motion. When you're doing the brave things, you'll feel brave. You don't get those feelings before you take the brave action. Same with confidence. These things happen as you're showing up and as you're doing the hard thing. They're showing up in those moments that you have the symptoms. That's it. That is the time to rewire. That is the time to respond. That is the time to observe your old reaction and choose something else. Your nervous system thinks something is terribly wrong. It thinks you are in danger. It is trying to protect you. It's trying to keep you in the cave, so to speak, on the couch, in the house, in the bed, away from the people, away from the scary things, away from the cars, away from the social events, away from the gym, away from life, to keep you safe. And when you feel the fear and you go, oh, back in the cave, when you feel the symptoms and you go, oh, back in the cave, you are then telling your nervous system, yep, you were right. That was dangerous. And I know how hard this is. I know how impossible it feels. It's meant to feel that way because that's the desired outcome of the nervous system, is keep you safe, keep you alive. It doesn't care if you're having a good time. You have to stop waiting for it to feel possible. You will learn that it's possible while you're experiencing new experiences. You will learn that it's possible as you start seeing, oh, look, it's happening for me. But it begins to happen because you begin to take action. We have to stop letting fear and symptoms be the deciding factor of what action we take. And most of us are letting those two things dictate everything we do. We wake up in the morning and we ask our body what the plan is for the day. And that just doesn't work when you're sensitized, because what your body is going to say, nope, it's scary, lots of pain, lots of symptoms. This is impossible. Sit back down. When you stop letting fear be the deciding factor, that is when your healing begins. And I get it. You may not like this answer. I didn't like it either, but I have to deliver this message. I have to deliver this answer because it's the way out of all of this. Sometimes people will leave snarky comments on my content, and they will try to boil what it is I teach down to a couple sentences. They'll be like, oh, so just ignore everything that's going on and just pretend it's not there and just live your life. They love to put it in quotes. And I get that. I respect it. It's a coping strategy that we have that goes, okay, I'm hearing this information and I'm going to boil it down so that it is palatable for me, so that I can understand it. So I get that. However, those people are rarely actually implementing the things that I teach, because they seem so simple, because it seems so easy. Now, I'm not saying that the way that they defined it is correct, but it has some truth to it. Yes, you have to get back out into your life. Yes, you have to let your symptoms be there. No, I don't say just ignore your symptoms or distract from your symptoms. So I'm not saying that everything that they are mentioning is correct. I'm just saying that if you have that kind of knee-jerk reaction to try to oversimplify it, oftentimes that is a distraction strategy. It is an avoidance behavior. It's an avoidance technique. Because if you can just say, oh, this is so easy, it's so simple, just ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist, there's no way that's going to work. But the truth of the matter is a lot of people aren't even applying that stuff because it's so challenging to do. So it doesn't matter that it's simple because it's not being applied. And I mean applied over the long term. I remember being in a facial pain group that was specific to like dental injuries, facial stuff and teeth stuff. And I was always frantically searching in these groups like healing, mind-body healing, TMS, recovery, full recovery, recovered, when I was doing all my searches. And I remember the creator of this specific support group said, I worked with one of the top doctors in the mind-body world. And she worked with him in a hospital setting, actually. And she said, I worked with him for 3 months. I did everything he told me to do. It didn't work. I don't think that kind of work applies to us. And obviously, when I personally saw that, it was devastating to me. But now being on the other side of it, I think 3 months? It's going to take longer than 3 months. And it's so sad to have lost that opportunity of getting better just because you feel like, well, I tried it for 3 months. And a lot of the time we're trying things completely doubting that they're going to work, freaking out every second day. And this takes time and it takes consistency and it takes bravery and it takes action before you're ready. It takes action before the symptoms come down. It takes action even in the midst of symptoms going up. I think this goes equally both ways. There are many people who are going to recover because they're willing to do this. And there are many people who won't recover because they're not willing to do it, because it is so scary, because it does feel so impossible. But that doesn't mean that it is. So I just want to reiterate one more time. It's going to feel impossible. The fact that it feels impossible for you is not unique to you. We all struggle with the same feeling, and we all have a very specific reason why it feels impossible to us, our own specific story. There's a mind-body group that I was in the past where I went in and I was like, does anyone else feel like it's impossible to recover because you have CPTSD and you're constantly in a trauma response? And it's like someone gave you the answer to a riddle, and the answer to the riddle is you just have to heal your anxiety, and you've been doing that for 20 years, and mine was from a dental injury. And I had this big, long story of why mine was different, why it was impossible for me, why everyone else was different, why everyone else had it more easy, why I wish I had been diagnosed with other things. If I had been diagnosed with these things, it would have been easier to recover because I would have been able to believe that they were nervous system driven. I've been there. I know. I get it. And there was a day where I had to cut that shit out fully and completely and say, I'm done with the excuses. I'm going to do my best here. I'm going to give it my all. I'm not going to be derailed by symptoms or fear anymore. That doesn't mean I didn't have symptoms. It doesn't mean that I didn't have fear. It means that I took action despite those things. There is no workaround with that. None. And the longer you wait for a workaround, the longer it will take for you to get better. So if you relate to this, if you've ever had the thought, this feels impossible, I want you to drop it in the comments. I want you to just drop the word me. We are not alone in this. You are not alone in this. It is so much more of a common experience than I ever knew. There are so many people getting better, and that should give you hope. So let it feel impossible. Feel that fear and do it anyway. Because once you do, your healing is going to take off. I hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye, everybody.